How you doing, everyone? This is Jason Lutz with Rate Mastery, 1003 Magnet, LO Magnet, you name it. Excited about our presentation today, by the way, Steal Control from the Realtor in your first meeting. But before I get started, can someone just let me know that you can see my screen, which has my ugly mug in the right-hand corner and says Steal Control from the Realtor in your first meeting, and that you can hear me okay, like the audio is all right. All right, good. All right, so this is actually a follow-up to a webinar that we had last week about how it is to get realtor appointments. And we talked about a specific sort of tactic. And I'm actually going to go over that a little bit here so that we're all sort of on the same page on the foundation of what it is that this initial meeting started from. Because it's an actual very difficult situation, and if we can make this work, we can make any sort of real estate agent appointment, like a referral or something like that, work. And we're going to go over why it is it's so important to steal control from the realtor in your first meeting so that we can kind of identify how it is that we're going to get the meeting to push in the direction that we need it to go. All right. So, and by the way, if you want the last webinar, which is about getting 5 real estate agent appointments per week, and I'm going to go over sort of the Cliff Notes version of that here in a second, just go to our Facebook page, which is in the lower left-hand corner, facebook.com/Rate Mastery. It's all there, slides, the scripts, everything. All right, so let me get this going. All right, cold calling. Now, the reason why I talked about cold calling last week is because it's really the only way that I know of, or at least have experience in getting a lot of real estate agent appointments in a short period of time. There's a lot of different things you can do. There's other, maybe even more effective ways, I suppose. But this is what my experience kind of lends it to. And I have a lot of experience in helping loan officers and myself get real estate agents appointment. And there's some math actually wrapped around the 5 realtor meetings per week. And we talked a lot about it in our last webinar, which is essentially this. And again, if you make 20 calls a day, you should expect anywhere from 1 to 2 scheduled appointments a day. But the actual number of appointments you'll have per week is about 5 because, some of them flake out. About 25% will flake out because we're cold calling these guys, right? I mean, we don't have a relationship. There's no trust. No one referred them. Typically, it's pretty darn cold. So there can be a fallout rate, but you can expect if you make that number of calls based on the scripts and the tactics that we talked about in the last webinar, you should have about that many appointments. We talked about the keys to cold calling real estate agents. And the most important thing that we spoke about is handle common objections up front, right? The common objections, we all know what they are. We've heard them a million times. It sounds something like, I already work with a loan officer, right? And as soon as they hear that you're a loan officer and they're a real estate agent, their guard goes up. So we talk about how you handle that objection, get over it so that you can ultimately get that real estate agent appointment. We talk about unique sales propositions. These are quick calls, right? So you need to have something that's really sort of poignant and it has some intrigue in it that appeals to their crocodile brain, which we talked about as well, and gets them curious enough to want to meet with you for 15 minutes. Now, it doesn't need to be something that no one ever invented, right? Or something that's so unique that is crazy. It can be something that's actually rather common that you've put a unique spin on to get their interest. And the conversation actually in the first meeting, the first face-to-face meeting, is rarely, in fact, it should never be specifically about this unique sales proposition, right? So, and we're going to talk about how that works as well. You need to keep it short, right? We have a specific objective in mind with cold calling, which is to get the first appointment, always. And then with our appointment, we have a specific objective in mind, which we're going to talk about in detail, but it's basically to get another appointment. Because we know that whether it's a cold call or a first meeting, which is, a 15 or 20 minute meeting that I sort of talk about in our scripts, you're not going to engender a ton of credibility, right? I mean, you're not going to cultivate a new relationship in 15 or 20 minutes. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking to further the cycle so that we can be trusted and so we can build that trust gap with the real estate agent so they ultimately feel comfortable in giving us a shot with a deal. Have a clear objective in mind. And this is where sort of the control comes in. When you go into a meeting, just like with a cold call, you need to have a specific outcome in mind. It is very common that we as like loan officers will go into a meeting with a real estate agent just excited to be meeting with them face to face. But that's sort of the wrong way to go about it, because they will control the conversation. They will move it in the direction that they want, which is rarely in the same direction that you need it to go, which is a second meeting. That is only a way that a relationship will be built. So have a clear objective and don't deviate. So, all right, we're at the first meeting. Now that we kind of went over what it is and how it is that we got it, we're at the first meeting. Particularly the way we're getting the meeting, which is through cold calling in this particular case. But frankly, regardless of how you got the meeting, even if it was a referral from another real estate agent, if you're meeting with them face to face in their office, sort of picture that, who has the power, right? It's the real estate agent, right? Who is the most needy? It's you. I mean, so we are in a very bad position right out of the gate. Right? And they know it. It's always the case with us and real estate agents, whether or not we're in a scheduled meeting or at a party, as soon as it's a realtor loan officer relationship, the typical dynamic is that the real estate agent has the control and they move the conversation the direction that they want to go. And we as loan officers usually oblige, right? And we need to not do that. And we're going to talk about how it is that we can gain control, but in a cool way. This isn't like confrontational or anything. We're going to use framing techniques, okay? And framing really can be summed up with this weird slide that actually came. It's odd. That's supposed to be a window, by the way, but it looks very over-granularized. I tried to make it cool, and it looks weird. But anyway, it's framing, right? And framing is perspective. And perspective really is, who is it that the group of people or individual, if it's a one-on-one meeting, is seeing everything through. And we've experienced, I think about this. You go to a party, right? And it's a pretty big party. And you walk in and you'll see, as we all have, kind of groups, right? Little circle groups. Everyone's drinking cocktails, having a great time, and everyone's sort of divided up. And even in those groups, as you look closer and as you walk towards it, you can see that there's typically one person that is sort of manipulating the conversation. They're the ones dominating the conversation. They may not be talking all the time, right? It's not like they're obnoxious about it. But you can tell that everyone's looking to them for the direction of the conversation. But it's even more than that. It's more than that because what ends up happening is those other people in the group, the people without frame control, are actually in their own mind's eye picturing what it is that person's saying from their perspective. And that's very powerful because all of a sudden, all these people, even though they have their own thoughts and feelings, are actually looking at it through the lens of the person who is dominating the conversation, the person who is in complete control of the frame, the person who has frame control. And actually, I mentioned this book in the last webinar, and I absolutely love it, but Oren Klaff does a really good job in kind of explaining something that's been around a long time. Framing and perspective and all that kind of stuff isn't new. But what I love about this book is he puts it in very simple terms with great stories behind it, and he is actually in a worse position than we are when we meet with a real estate agent. Like, it feels like when we go and meet with a real estate agent, we are not in control, right? We're always in the lower end. We never have frame control initially. But with Oren and his job, which is pitching deals, it's even worse for him because you kind of picture this. His job is to pitch big money deals, right? So people with widgets or projects or something that they need a lot of money for, they go to Oren and say, listen, we have this deal. We need $15 million. Now take our stuff and go get us $15 million. And his job is to create a presentation, which, mind you, he talks about is always only 20 minutes. Right? Can you imagine a $20 million deal, $15 million deal? He's done $100 million deals. His pitch is actually 20 minutes or less. So it kind of tells us something about what our conversation should be like. But anyway, so he talks about, and he goes into these rooms and these boardrooms, filled with millionaires and billionaires and hedge fund guys saying, listen, I have this idea. I think it's a good idea, and I need you to scratch a check for $15 million. Right? So how in the world does that guy in that situation take control away from people who are clearly in control, because he's coming to them begging for money, and he's coming to them as a mere, 3 or 4 millionaire, where these guys are worth millions, sometimes billion. I mean, he is just in a lower position. And so he talks about how it is that he takes control of it, and the tactics that he uses, and the framing techniques. And we can certainly apply this in our business, and you probably already do in a lot of ways, and you certainly see it, and you may not have known it, you just didn't identify with it, or at least I didn't when I read the book. So there are 3 basic framing techniques, and this is going to come together here in a minute, and everyone will kind of clearly understand how this works. There's the power frame, the time constraint frame, and the analyst frame. So people employ these frames to gain control. Again, frame is like a perspective. Now, real estate agents very rarely employ the analyst frame, which means you start digging into something with questions, super detailed questions into whatever it is you're offering or whatever the deal is, thereby derailing the conversation and moving it in a way that the presenter or the person never intended it to be, because that's not the typical flow of events. You usually give wide sweeping generalities and then you dig into details much later. Well, an analyst frame will just hammer right into the details. Real estate agents aren't normally like that because they're salespeople like us, right? So that's not a tactic that they normally employ, but they do employ all the time the power frame and the time constraint frame. And they're actually fairly similar and used in the same ways. And they almost immediately have the power frame. So let's kind of discuss what these are. So power frame. I guess a good example of a power frame that is just inherent would be you're driving down the road, you're speeding, and a cop pulls you over, right? You see the sirens and all that kind of stuff. And as they're walking up to the car to give you your ticket, presumably, you're coming up with all these different ways in which you're going to get out of the ticket, right? Oh, I was going with the flow of traffic, or no, I wasn't speeding at all. I was, going 2 over, and meanwhile, they had a radar gun and they know exactly how you're going. But anyway, you have these sort of notions in mind of how it is that you are going to take a very weak position that you have and get it to come out the way you want, which is getting out of the ticket. But what happens? Well, before they even walk up to the car, they're already in control. They already have you doing certain things that puts them in the power, right? You go and you reach for your license, you reach for your registration, you reach for your insurance. You're getting this stuff, and they're in power before they even walk up. Not to mention the fact that they have their, suit and all that kind of stuff that, gives them that sort of authority. And as soon as they kind of come up to the car in their uniform and their gun and all that, you immediately succumb to their frame. Almost every time. You may throw out a lob here or there saying I was going with the flow of traffic, but as soon as they say anything to push back, you lose, right? I mean, it's wherever this conversation is going because the cop wants it to go there, not because you have a frame over there, because their power frame is very, very powerful. It's almost impenetrable, right? So that's sort of an extreme example of a power frame that is almost, you can't get around. But how about this? You're at a party, you're in some sort of social situation, and you have 2 people, right? They walk up at the same time. You have a cardiac surgeon and you have a professional golfer, right? Initially, You might say, hey, the doctor has, the power, right? They're super rich and they have, all this education. They're obviously smarter than the professional, the golf pro, which is clearly not true, but it's sort of these notions that people have. But you flip the situation just a tad and you put the doctor getting lessons from the golf pro at the golf resort. All of a sudden, it's the golf pro that has all of the power because the doctor's doing exactly what they tell him. He's doing it when they tell him. He's doing it how they do. Everything that the golf pro tells them to do or says and listens to, the doctor does. The conversation and the whole meeting goes in the direction that the golf pro wants it to go. And the doctor isn't going to switch it around because they have no control here. They're out of their element. And so that's sort of the power frame and what it looks like. The time frame is what real estate agents, and actually happens all the time in our life, which is this. And you probably experienced this. I guess the best example I can think of in a real estate situation is this. You go to an office and you have a meeting with a bunch of different real estate agents, right? You get those cool lunch and learns or whatever, and you're in front of 7 or 8 or 10 real estate agents. So this is a cool opportunity. But the one thing they do immediately to let you know that you are under them and they have control is they say, listen, Jason Lutz, it's your turn and you have 20 minutes to talk at our lunch and learn. You go at it. So immediately they've set the stage. They've set the rules of engagement and you've already lost control. But you can gain that control back. And we actually did it in subtle ways with our cold calling techniques that we talked about before. But what you can do is simply say, well, no, I don't need 20 minutes. This presentation is just 15 minutes. I'll be in and I'll be out. So 15 is all I need. What that does is it takes control back from them. But more importantly, I think, well, as importantly, it lets them know that you have something very defined and specific to talk about, right? There's something that you are doing and have planned that they need to listen to because you have a plan. You're not just going with the flow and whatever it is that they talk about, right? So that is a simple technique that when they give you a time, you flip it around. And we do the same thing when we initially set up the appointment, right? We set the time frame. We said it was a 15-minute meeting or whatever it is you decide to define it as. But you have to be willing to adjust. Now, in a face-to-face meeting that we're going to be talking about very clearly here in a second, it's much less important or typical that a meeting will go sideways or people will stop paying attention or they'll start playing at their iPhones showing their power frame than if you're talking to them one-on-one in their office, right? That's highly unlikely. But you need to adjust it as things are going. But make sure that it's your time frame. So in our initial meeting, our objective is to set a second meeting. The only way we can make that objective happen every single time is if we gain control of the meeting and say or do specific things so that they know that we have a plan and we need to execute that plan. And this plan is in their best interest. Because initially, as we talked about before, you have zero control. I mean, you're at their whim. But once you gain it back, once you kind of listen to this sort of script and ask these particular questions, you'll gain control. So the first thing is we decide the time frame. We sort of did it in our initial conversation when we set up the appointment, which we talked about in Thursday's webinar. But we reiterate the time frame, right? We tell them, listen, I just need 15 minutes, and we stick with it. Right? We can adjust it if something happens during the course of the conversation as long as we're the ones in control. Otherwise, we let them know we got to bolt because we have another meeting. The objective needs to be defined. Now, our objective, like internally that we know we want to do, is we want to get a second appointment. But how do we articulate it to them so that they want a second appointment, right? So we let them know what it is our intentions are up front, which is this. Listen, when I called you, I spoke about this XYZ unique sales proposition, how to get consumers pushed off the fence. But you know what? What I need to know and to find out from you are your specific issues. What it is that you have problems with. What it is that your book of business is with. Because the reality is this, what we do a lot of times is we just start puking up all the cool things that we have to offer. And it's only half right. The part that's right is that we're talking to them about how it is that we can help build their business, and we're not talking about how great we are. The part that's totally wrong is that we have zero idea what it is that we have to offer and the unique sales propositions we have to offer at our company that will resonate with them. So we could be puking up all these cool things about listing program this and helps you get sellers that when they're only an investor buyer agent. They only deal with investors. And meanwhile, we just listed 15 things that we can to help the typical listing agent or whatever your typical unique sales proposition. So we need to let them know that, listen, we have all kinds of products and services to offer, all kinds of things to help real estate agents build their business in a multitude of different ways. But what I want to do here is really learn about your business, find out your pain points, and then come back in the next day or two, and I am going to deliver you a comprehensive plan on how it is that my company can help with those things. Okay? So define your objective, and your objective has to do with helping them and getting your second appointment. The best way for us in the position that we're in this initial meeting, and frankly, to be a quality salesperson, is to ask questions. Whoever is asking the questions is in control of the frame. They are in control of the situation. Whoever's answering the questions is not, right? If you're getting interviewed, at some company, the interviewee is always in control. The interviewer is always in control. The interviewee is never in control. That's why when you go into interview, like the best tactic to getting hired is start asking questions of whoever's trying to hire you, right? That way the conversation starts to go in the direction that you want it to go. Same situation. We ask them questions about their business so that we can learn more about them, so that our next meeting we can have a quality presentation that actually solves problems for them and uses their own words to solve those problems so that we can get a follow-up meeting. Here's some ideas as far as, not some of them aren't just ideas. They're things we need to know up front before we can ever help them. One of which is what kind of, there's two ofs there. What kind of business are you focusing on? Right? What kind of business are you dealing with? Like I said, if we were to take the unique sales proposition that we spoke about up front in the initial call and just focus on that, and it was a listing deal, and they're only an investor buyer agent, or they're for the most part an investor buyer agent, we're wasting our time, wasting a great meeting, and we're focusing on the wrong thing, and we lost them immediately. So we have to find out what kind of business that they're focusing on. We want to find out what their biggest struggles are, what their biggest issues in their business. And believe you me, they love talking about that, because there's likely to have been something that just happened that day or the day before that really pisses them off with their own loan officer or the listing, some sort of part of the transaction. People love to bitch and moan about what's going on. So we ask them, what are the biggest struggles in their business? And also, what is the biggest impediment in taking their business to the next level? What are some big successes that you've had over the last year? You want to talk about wins, things that they are excited about, right? And this is something that people like to talk about. They like to look back and they like to brag. And it's certainly something that you want to end on, or at least close to, as far as a positive. See, meanwhile, by the way, you're taking furious notes. And the reason why you take notes is because when you come back with the presentation, there's certain lexicon, there's certain words, there's certain phrases that they say and that you'll be able to pick up on that you're going to want to reuse and throw back at them in the presentation. You follow what I'm saying? Like if they say a certain phrase, you want to have their own words in the solution that you're giving it to them so it will really resonate. So make sure you're taking good notes, not only what they're saying, but the way they're saying it. What does your primary lender do for you that you really like? Now, you could flip it around, I suppose, and say, what is it that they do that pisses you off? But that is not a good sort of, it can turn people off. So you want to find out what is it that their current lender does so well that keeps them with them. And this is a great question so that you can kind of determine whether or not they're really tied to their existing lender and how hard. Like they could list like a whole boatload of things. Oh God, they do this, they do that, they have this marketing program, they call me right back. They, okay, they're probably tied pretty tight and you want to approach this relationship in a different way. If they're like, well, Sally's good because, deals tend to close on time and normally she calls me back and the clients seem to like her. That wouldn't be, very strong sort of language, but it also gives you an insight of the things that you sort of need to have in your follow-up presentation that you kind of need to check off as far as, yeah, we do that, because they clearly have certain things in their own mind and things that they've experienced with a lender that they like that they need to see and hear and experience on a regular basis. Then lastly, you set up the follow-up appointment. Okay? Now, as we talked about before, when we're asking questions, we're in control. When we're digging deeper into what it is that the real estate agent needs and wants and their specific issues, then we're in control. And we've already told them up front that this is our goal, is to find out their specific issues rather than just throwing up on them everywhere about what it is that we do and what it is that we can do for real estate agents that they may or may not have the same issue with. So when you set up the follow-up meeting, you make it clear that, listen, you identified these 3 issues in your business that kind of are keeping you from taking it to the next level. In my presentation for you on Thursday, I'm going to go over all those things. It's going to be 15, 20 minutes, and I'm going to show you specifically how we do it. Now, a lot of times, the biggest mistake that I would make is that as soon as they identified a problem that I knew we had a solution for, I said, man, I just have these pipeline of consumers and I can never really seem to get them off the fence. They're always just kind of looky-loo. And immediately I think, oh man, I have this pre-lock marketing thing. It's so cool. This is perfect for them. Oh, perfect. I would say, yep, you know what? I feel your pain and here's my solution. First of all, it doesn't adhere to our objective, which is to get in front of them. The second thing is, if it's a problem for them, it's likely to have been a problem for a while. And the fact that we meet them for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and all of a sudden, boom, we have a solution to all their problems, and we turn this into an hour-long meeting, is almost like offensive to them. I mean, they won't think of it that way, but it can be kind of construed that way, right? Because they have a problem that they haven't been able to solve. And meanwhile, this guy who doesn't know anything about their business or just found out has a solution within 30 seconds of how it is that they can fix a problem I've consistently have. How good could that solution probably be? The answer is probably not good. It hasn't been thought through, or at least every facet of it. So we set up a follow-up meeting so that we can take those issues that we've written down, that they've said, they've articulated, and we can have a follow-up meeting that basically states that we are going to identify these issues, and when we have, we're going to give you the solution, and when we've done that, we should probably partner up if you think that those solutions really solve your problems. We're right at the 30-minute mark, right? I don't want to go too long here because 10:30. Okay, so thank you, by the way, for jumping on this webinar. I don't know if anyone has any questions. We're actually already bumping up against our 30-minute mark for our Rate Mastery webinars, but this is how to steal control from the realtor in your first meeting. I appreciate it. We will have a webinar. I'm not sure what it is on this next Thursday, but I will certainly let everyone know via email. And you can also go to our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Rate Mastery, to not only find out when our next webinar is, but also to get this recording of this presentation, okay? And so you'll have all the slides, you'll have everything on there. Just like us on Facebook, and obviously everyone knows how it works. It'll come across your timeline. I would guess I'll be done with it in the next, well, probably by the end of the day. Worst case scenario, Friday, you'll have it. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone. By the way, if you have any questions or you think of anything, again, you can just go to our Facebook page and ask us those questions. Have a great one. Have a great weekend, and thanks for coming.